So I pretty much grew up in a nice little neighborhood where all the families and kids played together. We all went to the same school and all the parents knew us, and we were free to roam as long as we were home before the streetlights came on. We pretty much knew everyone, or at least recognized them if they lived in the same area. Here's where the guy in the wheelchair comes in. He's well known. He was always strolling through the streets. He actually lived on the same street a few houses down, in fact. And no one ever really talked to him. He stuck in his own group of friends. He always gave me a weird vibe, though, anytime I came across him, but it never gave me a reason to not trust him at all or anything. Well, one day, my sister and I, we were maybe 6 and 10 at the time, were riding our bikes as we usually did, when the guy in the wheelchair turned our street. My gut told me that something was off, and I slowed down my bike and told my sister to ride ahead of me. But then, the guy rolls faster down the street and tells us that he needs help. I instantly tell him that we couldn't help him and that we needed to get home. But he keeps saying, "I really need help. Please help me." I tell my sister to ride as fast as she can home. And this guy, no shit, stands up and starts running after us. We jump off our bikes and run inside telling my dad what happened. And long story short, my dad and my older cousin went down to his house when he was sitting outside with his friends. My dad yells at us to stay inside, and apparently my dad pistol whipped him and told him to never even look at our direction ever again. Needless to say, anytime he's seen us since then, he would roll his ass to the other side of the street. This happened a couple of years ago. I was a 9 or 10-year-old boy and was on the beach with my family and a friend of mine's family. She was around 11 or 12 at the time. At some point, me and my friend wandered away from our families and were just playing around on the beach. We decided to explore the nearby area around the beach and got to a secluded spot in a forest that was maybe 5 or 10 minutes from where our families were. When we got there, we met a man who was all alone there. He was maybe in his mid to late 30s, and when he saw us, he smiled and walked towards us. We just stood there, not really thinking anything of this, but he started the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "Hey there, I'm a photographer for a model agency, and I couldn't help but think that you two would be perfect for a photo shoot." He continued by saying how he thought my friend was really pretty and that if we agreed to the shoot, we would make a ton of money. At the beginning, we were really excited and we told him that we just wanted to make sure that it was alright with our parents. And this is when it started to get kind of weird, but I didn't really think anything of it just yet. He said that we should just follow him and not tell our parents anything, and it wasn't far from here, and he kept talking about all the money that we'd make if we just followed him without saying a word. My friend started to get skeptical and said that we weren't interested and started to walk away while grabbing my hand to make sure I followed her. He started to follow us though, raising his voice a bit and again continued talking about that if we just followed him and we did the shoot that we'd make so much money. This is when my friend held onto my arm really hard and we just booked it. He stopped following us and he also stopped saying anything. And when I looked behind me as we ran, I just saw him staring at us with a really annoyed look on his face. We told our families about this, and some of the adults went to where we said that we saw him, but of course, he was gone by now. I'm really grateful to my friend for realizing that something with the situation that we were in just wasn't right, because it could have been a whole lot worse. So back in 2014, I was your average angsty teen, a 17-year-old female, average build and blonde, and I was in Argos with my friend, her friend, and her baby. It was a summery day and I was wearing shorts, and due to the fact that I'm curvy, I wear tights to prevent chub rub, which is something all the curvy girls will understand, I'm sure. For those not from the UK, Argos is like a crappier version of IKEA. So we walked in talking about what we were going to buy, because the woman who came with me, my friend, was having another baby. As we walked into the store and started checking out the catalogs, a 6-foot-plus beer-smelling guy came up to us and introduced himself by shaking my hand and loudly saying, "My name is Roundus," or something. We obviously thought that this was weird because he came over to us from the other side of the store. So we just tried to ignore him and walked off, back to where he was. As we walked to the queue, he tried saying something to us again, but he was mumbling and speaking a different language. I'm guessing Polish or Russian or something, and I watched him leave in my peripheral vision, convinced that he was gone. And so I relaxed and continued chatting. Now, bear in mind, I was in the midst of my rebellious stage, and had several tattoos by this point, including bows on the backs of my legs, mid-thigh, like where the stockings would be. Next thing I'm aware of, there's this wet sensation on the back of my leg. I turn around, looking down to see this weirdo getting back up and walking away after licking my tattoo. Gross, I know. I froze in shock as this guy walked away after licking my leg for a solid 15 to 20 seconds. The store assistant called the police for me, and I called my boyfriend in hysterics. The police came by my house the next day. I lived with my housemates to speak to me, and they also asked if it was possible for a DNA sample. They wanted to swab my leg. But unfortunately, I had already showered. Luckily though, my tights and shorts were still on the floor from when I threw them when I took them off upon my arrival home. So I gave my tights to the police, and about a week later, I heard back from them that the man had been arrested for licking the legs of several other women, given 6 months jail time and community service. In the end, this weirdo was locked up, and I'm grateful for that. But had I been alone or in some other place where I wasn't surrounded by people, I'm pretty certain that this guy was brazen enough to have tried something else. Just for a better understanding of my surroundings, I'm from Kentucky. There's lots of wooded area and people love their guns here, including me. I used to not believe that there was unknown stuff in the woods. I thought maybe Bigfoot, maybe, could be real, but I severely doubted it. After this happened, I know for sure that there is something unknown out there. I had just bought my first AR-15 style rifle, a Ruger AR-556 for anyone who cares, and bought a 60-round drum magazine for it at Gander Mountain while they were going out of business because why the fuck not, right? Reading up on the drum, I read that they were amazing and rarely had any issues at all. This will be important later. A few days after I got it, I finally decided to take it out for a test drive and sight in my gun a little better. And here's where everything just went to shit. As I said above, Kentucky is super wooded. 3/4 of the land I lived on was just totally thick woods. There was a main path for driving our gator, and a few small paths our cows had made in the woods. But apart from that, there was very little. I decided to walk along our creek that had a small path, half cleared by our cows. At the end of the path is a big field our cows graze in, and where I sight in guns when the cows aren't there. As soon as I crossed the fence to go to the field, I instantly felt like I was being watched, closely too. I brushed it off because I've walked back there 1,000 times before and never been bothered by anything. So I keep walking and ignoring the feeling of being watched, but at the same time, I'm very aware of it too. I know I feel like I'm being watched, but I wasn't giving it any noticeable attention. The walk to the field along the creek is a pretty short walk, maybe 2 minutes at a slow pace. The further I walked though, the more intense this feeling got, like I was getting closer to whatever was watching me. About halfway there, the feeling got so intense that I couldn't ignore it anymore. The drum magazine I had with me was unloaded, so I stopped and started loading it. I only bought 20 rounds with me because I was just going to sight in my gun, and 20 should have been plenty. So, now I'm stopped, paying extremely close attention to what's going on around me and loading my magazine. The exact moment that I started putting rounds in the drum, I smelt something dead. Like it had been dead for a while and rotting in the sun. I started looking around, and right behind me was what was left of a possum. It was totally torn to pieces too. It was almost like it was placed there for me to find it. But the thing is that it looked like it had been dead maybe a day at most, and what I was smelling seemed like it was far more decomposed. This obviously didn't sit well with me, so I double-timed it on the magazine loading. In hindsight, I guess I should have taken the dead possum as a last chance to turn around. I decided to keep going though. I had never had any problems back there before, so I assumed my brain was just being paranoid or something. I was almost to the field when I saw it. I was at the end of the creek, and the feeling of being watched was unbearable at this point. Just as I was near the end of the creek and the edge of the woods, I heard a splash in the water. Me being on edge, immediately turned toward the noise, gun ready but no round in the chamber. And walking down the creek away from me was something that I'll never forget. It was at least 8 feet tall, probably taller, really skinny. I mean, imagine a grown man that weighs 120 pounds, and now stretch him out to be 8 feet tall, but his body width stays the same. It had very long arms and walked on 2 legs. Skin stretched tightly across its body, and it made no noise aside from the splash when it stepped into the creek while it walked. It also had a very weird walk, almost like a waddle, but taking large steps. But that could have been because it was on a muddy creek bank. It was also a light brown color, almost like the color of a deer or something. And that's all I can remember. Now, I knew why I felt while I was being watched. Magazine loaded, bolt ready to send a round into the chamber, I got myself steady. Remember what I said earlier about the magazine being extremely reliable? Well, I pressed the bolt release on the gun to chamber a round, just in case this monstrous thing decides to attack or something. I didn't intend to strike first or anything though. But the round, it gets stuck somehow, and doesn't even budge out of the magazine. I had never used that magazine before, so it didn't fail from heavy use or anything. And a bolt closing from a gun has enough force to break your finger. So, why didn't this magazine work? My only guess is that the thing had something to do with it. The magazine never worked right again after that too, and I had to return it to Magpul. Needless to say, I didn't tell them that this happened. I just told them that the magazine failed several times. Anyway, the gun jammed on the first round, which is usually the easiest. The thing books it out of there without running or making a noise. I had just long enough exposure to it to get the details that I provided earlier. But now, for assumptions. It happened about late May last year. I still have the emails from Magpul regarding the drums, so I'm using those as reference because after this, I needed something reliable. As for what the creature was, me and a friend who knows more about this stuff than I do have decided that it could have been a Wendigo. I know, it sounds crazy, but the reason we think it was a Wendigo is because everything I described matches them near perfectly. I had read that they were incredibly thin and tall, have a stench of death that follows them everywhere, which explains the smell of the possum. They're very fast, can be several colors, light brown included, and that they sometimes violently kill other animals to scare humans away. Again, the possum. The only thing that we couldn't come up with was its behavior. Why am I still alive if this Wendigo actually existed? Wendigos are supposed to be incredibly aggressive. Aside from watching me, it really did nothing. It didn't try to attack or confront me, and it ran from me like it was scared or trying to draw me to somewhere where it wanted me to be. This all being said, I've never had another encounter with it. I've gone to the same field, taken the same path expecting to be watched, and have not gotten that feeling of being watched as strongly as that day ever since. Something was definitely out there, and you, or anyone else, can't convince me otherwise. I've tried to trick myself into thinking that I'm being watched out there, and it still had no comparison between that day. If any of you guys have ever seen anything like this, I sure would be grateful for some comments. Anyway, I just needed to talk about this to get it off my chest. Also, sorry for the novel, guys, but I felt like I needed to include every detail that I could to better explain the situation. The little details really bring out how absolutely fucked I could have been. Every little thing just happened to line up to screw me. G'day mates, it's Busta here, and I hope you guys are enjoying this week's stories. Just so you guys know, I've actually put a whole bunch of new episodes up on Be Scared, the Castbox original podcast, so I hope you guys go and check it out on Castbox. It's available on Apple too, and everywhere you normally listen to podcasts today, so if you want to listen there too, that's fine. I'm adding a link in the description below so that you guys can subscribe to either Castbox or through Apple. Just so you guys know, the podcast is a weekly thing and it features stories from No Sleep, series stories, and the occasional set of true scary stories. It's completely free to subscribe to me there, and you can even download the Castbox app on your phone so you don't miss anything. And by the way, it would be really cool if you guys could review the podcast on Apple as well. I would love to hear your feedback and comments there. Also, I just want to thank you guys for tuning in every week and being here. I know a lot of you guys have been asking for the podcast for a long time, and without all of you guys, the podcast, it honestly never would have happened. So thank you guys for being so supportive and tuning in every single week. I'm super excited to share all this with you guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys there. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you mates in the next one.